And Jackie Durand signing in for stage 13 now for Avignon across to Draguignan. And this is Bastille Day, and the pressure on the French again now to try and win a stage.
Well, Jackie Durand is always an aggressive bike rider, Phil, when it comes to these kind of stages. And certainly today is a stage that the French would like to try and take out. The 14th of July is a very special day for them. And that today they face 185 kilometres on the road to Draguignan. And the last few kilometres, Phil, are very difficult indeed.
Well, after the Battle of Mont Ventoux, 151 riders left of the 180. And this was a stage many of the riders feared here as we go across the Vaucluse and the Var, heading to Draguignan. But I'm not so sure after the battering they all received on Mont Ventoux, they'll be in aggressive mood.
Well, this man certainly is very comfortable at the moment. Eric Zabel looked like it was going to be a close competition, but now leads with 195 points ahead of Roman Weinsteins with 102. All his challenges, Phil, starting to disappear.
And good start to the day as we now approach the sprint here at Robillon. Wouters getting in the 6 points, Zabel second and Nico Martin third. Eric Zabel begins to look very good in that competition again now, because the men who challenged him, Steels, O'Grady and Vust, are no longer in the Tour, and now a breakaway developing.
Well, this is the last three survivors of a breakaway that was 13 riders strong, with some very good men in it, but it split up over the last climb. And in fact, Nicolas Jalabert, the brother of Laurent Jalabert, is in this group with Pascal Hervé and Vicente Garcia Acosta, the Banesto rider. And we had to go back to the finish in Mende when Jalabert won that climb, and on the 14th of July as well. So maybe his brother's trying to get himself the same victory and ride into the wheel marks of Big Brother today.
Well, I'm sure he hopes that, because he has had a pretty good tour so far, the Côte de l'Esparusse here, and that Nicolas Jalabert has decided to launch an attack. He's got 16 kilometres to go.
Well, that was a good attack, but this man looks pretty strong here, and what a crowd, Phil, that has turned out. Garcia Acosta has now decided he's going to launch the counter-attack before the summit of this climb, and I'm quite surprised to see Pascal Hervé, the other Frenchman, put into difficulty, because he had showed good form on the earlier days of this year's Tour de France, but Nicolas Jalabert is clawing his way back to the big Spaniard.
Well, the Spanish rider has been very, very active. In fact, Banesto have ridden extremely well here. They're engaged in a battle now with the Kelme team for the team race. Kelme coming up from 19th team to be challengers in this event. And now it looks as though Nicolas Jalabert, perhaps inspired by the fact he is French, has fought his way back into the action. And so too has Pascal Hervé, and he's gone.
Well, I've got a funny feeling these two French guys, Phil, today are actually trying to work the old 1-2 on Vicente Garcia Acosta, but that hasn't worked too well, because in fact he's launched another counter-attack after that one of Hervé.
Well, it was almost as if Hervé was waiting for Jalabert. Jalabert took a bottle from the car there, and in fact Garcia Acosta saw that and he is gone. And now they're going to have to recover, because one Spanish rider has worked a real number on the two Frenchmen.
Well, Jalabert there trying to keep himself in contact, not looking too good though, because, you know, I think Garcia Acosta was getting a little fed up with these constant attacks from the two Frenchmen, and that is a serious attack. He's got the gap right now, Phil. I think those two Frenchmen are going to have to get themselves back together and try and pull himself back.
So, Vicente Garcia Acosta, he's a very big man, but they're not going to catch him now because he's holding them off here. The time gap has gone up. He's never been really clear. He's got about 20 seconds over them, but he's won the stage, and they'll be kicking themselves now, Paul, because this man has stolen their day of celebration.
Well, they attacked him one at a time as he goes across the line there, Phil, to take his first victory of this year, and only his 6th as a professional athlete. And coming in for second place, Nicolas Jalabert, well, Phil, he can only wonder about what might have been.
And here comes Nicolas Jalabert and Laurent Pascal Hervé, rather. And they are going to have to settle for second here for Nicolas. He'd go to bed tonight dreaming of what might have been. He looked good all of the way, and he's finishing 25 seconds down. Hervé further back than that. As the sprints continue here now, this is Trentin coming in, and he just gets the better there of Stéphane Herlot. But this is the man who has celebrated today, and Banesto have got themselves a good stage win here.
Well, it's turning out to be a great battle as we look here at Robbie McEwen coming across the line. For McEwen also, it's a question of what might have been, because he was also in that group of 13 riders, and Eric Zabel pretty close on his heels, 10 minutes back.
Zarbalo getting some 12th place there. That will give him more points in that competition. There's the result. So there was a real battle on Bastille Day, but from the wrong department. It was from Spain, in fact, who gets the victory over Jalabert Hervé Trentin from the Vino Calderola team. And looking further down, all of these riders finishing together. Lance Armstrong safely in 27th place. Marco Pantani keeping an eye on Lance. David Miller there as well. And so the Banesto rider, who rode his first Tour de France in 1997. He didn't finish it though till 1999. There's the overall situation. Ulrich still the same, nothing changed because none of the boys up front. The best was Mark Wouters in the break today. He lies 17th, 12 minutes 15 back. And the rest of the riders all holding on to their positions as we get near to the Alps. So Lance Armstrong getting another yellow jersey and looking extremely happy as the race now moves on towards Briançon. Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the Tour de France. We are now on stage 14. We're at the entry to the Alps. 3 very tough days now lying ahead of the survivors of this year's Tour. So far they've done just over 2,000 kilometres, but if any of them are feeling in any way weak, they simply won't survive the next 3 days of this race. This is a massive stage today, 249 kilometres. The riders going over 3 mountain passes. They are coming away from Draguignan to here in Briançon. It is a very tough day indeed. The wind too is still blowing and the temperatures are most unseasonal like. Let's have a look at the overall situation. Lance Armstrong still leading by just under 5 minutes from Jan Ullrich. Yoshiba Bolocki is third and Mark Wouters, after a good day yesterday, has come back up to 4th place overall. Well, a nervous bunch, I would think, heading out into the first of 3 tough days in the Alps now. They get 1 rest day in the middle of it, 9:30 in the morning, and a massive stage, Paul, almost 250 kilometres. You've got 2 first categories, a second category, and the big one of the Col d'Izoard.
I think there's going to be some very sore legs over that final climb of the day, the Col d'Izoard, which they reach after 228 kilometres in the saddle. I would think today we're looking at 8.5 hours of bike racing. The temperature quite clement, 20 degrees C, but already Pascal Hervé is out on the attack, trying to lead out Richard Virenque and the man who leads the King of the Mountains competition, Ochoa.
Well, this is the first climb of the day, and Virenque is over the top of it there, chased over by Pascal Hervé. Beautiful day for a change in the Alps, because there's been all sorts of worries here about the weather conditions with the possibilities of snow. On the way down now, on very good roads. There you can see the beautiful sky here now in the Alps, and Hervé has been such a loyal teammate to Richard Virenque, yet he seems at times to be even stronger than Richard himself. Now that was a brief glimpse of Roberto Conti there. And here's Lance Armstrong a little bit further back down, still talking with Johan Bruneel.
It's a long day in the saddle for these guys with 3 very big mountain passes. The Col d'Alos at 127 kilometres, the Col de Var at 177 kilometres, and the final climb of the day, the Col d'Izoard. And it was, Phil, the Col d'Izoard where in the Giro d'Italia, Marco Pantani announced his return to the top of international cycling, and I'm fairly certain that he will be announcing that he's back again today, because that is the sort of climb that suits Pantani. Pantani there on the right-hand side, moving forward already, looking for the attack.
And Pantani now is looking once again a dangerous rider, and he looks as though he's finding his form. He's going to test his legs, because this was a very happy stage for him, as Paul has said, in this year's Tour of Italy. He really clipped his own wings to look after Stefano Garzelli in that race, his teammate. But Garzelli is not here now, and what may have been a dress rehearsal then, it can be the real thing on this stage to Briançon.
Well, Marco Pantani is looking to try and drag himself up in the overall rankings. He thinks that a place on the podium Paris is not too far out of sight, and that's why he has to go out and blow the race apart. The man on his wheel right now is Richard Virenque. Virenque has managed to stay with the little climber from Italy. The Devils mixing it in with the rest of them as well. Lance Armstrong, Phil, is in 4th position there with Kevin Livingston. Livingston riding an excellent race today, staying alongside his leader for as long as possible.
Well, in the first day, and the only day in the Pyrenees, Armstrong was isolated soon after the big climb there. On the way to the final climb, he had to look after himself, which, as we know now, he did extremely well. But now we have got Marco Pantani here trying to disturb the rhythm of the yellow jersey.
Well, moving forward, one of the big riders from Festina is actually leaving behind the man Jan Ulrich. That looks like Christophe Moreau, who's moving across there onto the tail of Richard Virenque. A great ride by him. But the two men riding off the front of this group right now, Phil, are Marco Pantani and Lance Armstrong. But there are several riders up the road at the moment, because we did have a very large breakaway, and these two riders are trying to pull back that group. And I feel certain that before we reach the summit of the final climb of the day, we will have these riders pulling back that early breakaway group.
Well, this is a big attack by Pantani now, and Armstrong seems at the moment to be a match of it. But look at the way Lance is having to chase down. This is an attack, and Armstrong will not be working out quite yet as to why Marco is putting in such an early effort.
Well, Pantani just wants to blow the whole of the race apart. He needs to get himself time, Phil, over men like Jan Ulrich, men like Richard Virenque, and men like Ochoa as well, if he wants to pull himself high in the rankings. He started the day 13th overall, 10.5 minutes behind. And if he does want to get onto the podium in Paris, he needs major time.
And this man here, Christophe Moreau, big test day for him to see if he can survive in the mountains. We know he can ride the time trials, but Lockie again is in that group now. They picked up Roberto Conti here. Pantani and Armstrong, and now are they going to go straight by? Because Armstrong now, Paul, is starting to work with Pantani.
Well, he certainly is. He realises he's got a chance to try and open up a gap there. Roberto Conti, a few years ago, actually raced on the same team as Marco Pantani. Now he switched across to ride for Vinny Calderilla. But look at this. This is Pascal Hervé. He is the domestique for Richard Virenque, and he has ridden across the gap there, Phil, to join the strongest men in the bike race. He's left his own teammate Virenque behind.
Yes, but he's still looking for him and constantly looks over the back. But he's demonstrated time and time again he seems to be riding better than Richard Virenque, and yet he waits for him all of the time to see him come up to the group. There's four riders got themselves there as we pull back now to have a look a little bit down. Virenque is the other yellowish jersey down there in that group, and Ulrich is in there as well. It looks as though Conti now is in a spot of bother. Armstrong is trying to ride away here.
Well, he's put the pressure on, and Marco Pantani is not able to respond to this kind of attack. He's the kind of rider, Phil, who has to change his accelerations on the slopes of a climb like this. A real climber who will launch different speeds. He'll pick the pace up, and he can't actually follow this acceleration by Armstrong. And in fact, his ex-teammate now, Conti, coming forward to set the pace for the little pirate.
Well, passive it may be just at the minute. Remember, he was 136 at the start of this race after the time trial. He's climbed right up now. Armstrong, though, we saw him do this last year when he got very confident, and it didn't work out for him. He came back to the group.
Well, that was in the Pyrenees, and he really blew up towards the end there. And I think at the moment Armstrong needs to just ride more sensibly. He's got a huge advantage over the rest of the main field. You know, he started the day 4 minutes and 55 seconds ahead of Jan Ulrich, and he doesn't need all that much time. But we did see earlier this season in the Giro d'Italia, Francesco Casagrande, he didn't attack, and he played a much more of a waiting game, and at the end of it he lost it all in the final time trial. So maybe Armstrong feels if he's got the form, go out there, put the hammer down and try and get as much time as possible before the final time trial.
Well, Ulrich is now rejoined in this little group here. Yoshiba Bolocki continues to surprise everybody. There's the situation. Botero is the rider ahead. There are others in between as well. Armstrong still 3 minutes 12 back, and Ulrich some 26 seconds behind at the group Armstrong. And that's that group there. Now we go up and see Botero for the first time. He has been doing a wonderful ride all alone. This man never ceases to surprise, and by the end of this day could be the King of the Mountains leader.
Well, Armstrong there catching Odriozola, another of the riders in that early breakaway. Also somewhere up the road, I think, is Baranovsky as well. The Kelme rider we're catching here is Pasquale Lorente. He will soon be back in the fold. They're getting a chance to see what it looks like when the yellow jersey gets angry.
Well, this long climb as they continue to make their way up the climb now, for the moment at least. Javier Pasquale Lorente is up with Lance Armstrong. He was up with the original leading group. He's come backwards. As now we see it nearer the top of the climb. Botero here stamping his authority on the mountains.
Well, what a great move by Botero. In fact, he wasn't in that early group of 7 riders. He actually rode across to it on the valley road, and then as soon as they hit the slopes of this mountain here, just went straight past. He's now got an advantage of around about 2.5 minutes over the Lance Armstrong group, and Armstrong's advantage over the rest of the field, Phil, is actually shrinking because they're starting to come back to him.
Well, Armstrong might feel he's pulling this race nicely under control here, because it's been an awful long day in the saddle. Well over 8 hours by the time that they get down to the finish for many of these riders today. And they'll be lucky at the front group to beat 8 hours. 250 kilometres with these mountain climbs makes it a torturous day, and still with tomorrow to come.
Well, Fernando Escartin has recovered too. He was dropped on the earlier slopes of this climb, and he too now has pulled himself into this group. He's just at the back. The two Festina twins are there, Josipa Berlocki and Christophe Moreau. Jan Ullrich now also looking very comfortable. I think, you know, that in fact Lance Armstrong has decided just to take it easy. He realizes there's an awful long way to go from the top of this final climb of the day, the Col d'Izoard, down to the finish line in Briançon. As we look now at Paolo Savardelli, he too was in this earlier breakaway group, and he's still managing to stay alongside Baranovsky,
who goes over in second. Savardelli goes over in third, and it's a little bit of a gap since Botero went over, and this man seems to be able to do everything in his first tour. He is also a very, very talented descender. Here's the select group with all the men that matter to Lance Armstrong in it. None of the riders in front are doing him that much damage at the moment. Armstrong coming up the mountain now. He's heading up behind Richard Virenque. Virenque goes over in fourth place. He's got to keep scoring points because Botero is the next candidate for the leader in the mountains. Here he is now. Well, as we saw in the Giro d'Italia, this road leads straight down into Briançon. In the Giro d'Italia, they went up through the old town, but frankly, the Tour de France is a much bigger race than the Giro, and they will come around to the same finishing line, but from a different direction. There's still a very nasty climb.
It's still not very easy, I have to say. From the summit of the Col d'Izoard, there is 20 kilometers down to the finishing line. This now is Daniele Nardello coming forward with Manuel Beltran in there as well. He's a man also trying to ride high into the overall standings. But this man, Phil, what an incredible background he had in the sport of cycling. He started off as a BMX rider and decided once the World Track Championships came to Colombia that he would try and in fact qualify. He did that and then decided to turn professional on the road. Completely varied background.
Well, he's showing us now he's a very versatile rider, but this is the face of Richard Virenque, himself a well-known carefree descender, as he tries to get down there now to the bottom. I don't know whether he can pick up Botero, but he's going to give it his best shot. This is a lovely road for a fast descent.
Well, he's fourth place on the road at the moment. One man who might make the junction to the leading rider, in fact, is Paolo Savardelli. He's caught in the middle here of no man's land. He was dropped on the slopes of that climb from Botero, but he is a very good descender. Virenque at the moment, Phil, 3 minutes behind. He's trying to take an advantage over the Armstrong group, mainly to try and pull himself up into the position of best Frenchman. But look at that face.
That's incredible. He might well see Savardelli shortly and Baranovsky. They're just ahead as they continue the pursuit of Botero, but we're running out of cameras, quite honestly. And there's still chatting going on here, and I think Marco Pantani is smiling.
Little discussion between Armstrong and Pantani there. A lot of rumours starting to circulate about discussions and statements made by both of these riders in the press, all really going back to that victory and the disputable victory really at the top of the Mont Ventoux.
Yes, everybody feels that Lance Armstrong gave the victory to Marco Pantani instead of taking it for himself. Anyway, Paul, they're together still, and Pantani is slowly but surely getting himself back at the front end of the Tour de France this year.
He certainly is, and there's still a couple of mountain stages to go when he could cause a serious amount of difficulty. But this has been a great operation today for the Kelme squad. 3 riders in this group at the moment, 1 off the front of the bike race, so they will be riding high in the team standings, and what a coup that would be for them to beat the team regarded as Spain's #1, the Banesto squad, who are currently the #1 in that competition.
And especially as Kelme were one of the last teams invited to ride the Tour, in effect a wild card. This is the face of the rider who has impressed for 3 weeks here. He has been on long breakaways on flat roads. He has shown us he can ride a good time trial. He can certainly climb, and he's shown us too he has great skill going downhill, which is a very definite skill of its own.
Well, here is the confirmation of the team, the King of the Mountains competition right now. Botero taking over the lead from his own teammate Ochoa, and for the moment Richard Virenque not getting into the top 3 and also not getting away from this group because they're right on his tail.
And so Virenque is back in this little select group. Now, wise decision because they were obviously going quick. 3 Telecom riders in this little patch now as the group reforms around Richard Virenque. I don't see Pascal Hervé there, but oh, there he is, and so they are all there.
Well, that was Vinokurov, the other Telecom rider in there. Guerini was the other man. They are keeping the tempo on at the front. Onto the final slope of this climb up through the town of Briançon. This might not be through the old town, Phil, but you know when you've ridden 249 kilometers, that hurts.
Well, in some ways, I think it's a harder finish than the one through the Old Town, because at least you usually have a big crowd shouting in your ear in the Old Town. Here, the barrier back, and as you can see here now, Santiago Botero may have had a great day in the high climbs of the Alps on this opening day, but he's finding this lesser slope much more difficult as he heads up to 1 kilometre to go. The crowd are willing him on now. He still has a gap over the field of more than 2.5 minutes, and that'll be on Salvadelli.
Well, that's a good sight for him. If he can look back down the finishing straight now, Phil, he will see there is nobody at all in sight. But this climb to him must seem interminable, because we've been in the saddle for almost 8 hours. On the descent, you see Salvadelli going through the final corners there. He's over 2 minutes behind at the moment, and he's actually always losing ground on the man at the front.
So 2:13 is the gap, so they're not going to catch Botero now. Kelme are going to get themselves an outstanding stage victory here. Spain are having a wonderful tour when you think about it, and he is going to continue. He's a Colombian, by the way, but he rides for a Spanish team. He is in fact the only Colombian rider left in the event.
Well, the last few meters for him, he puts it down just a little bit in the gears just to try and keep his legs ticking over at the moment. He's going to get the stage victory, Phil. He's going to get the King of the Mountains jersey as well at the end of this very long day in the saddle. And look at the clock, 7 hours, 55 minutes, and he's not yet at the line.
What a tough ride this has been. It was so long. It was the distance particularly that has made this a real tough one. But for him, it's going to be one of victory. As he salutes the skies here now, Colombia have a good man again coming out of that South American country. As meanwhile, on the slopes here, it looks as though Pantani, who has annoyed everybody all day, has still got something left in those legs.
Well, he's trying to get away to try and get himself a high place in the standings. One man who hasn't been caught, though, is Paulo Salvadelli. He's just in front of the Pirate at the moment, only, though, Phil, by about 10 or 15 seconds. He has survived. He had hoped to try and get himself the stage victory today. He's going to have to settle for second.
Salvadelli must have some inkling he's coming up here, and there's not much left in Salvadelli's legs either. Former second in the Giro d'Italia, and now trying to get a good result out of this rather disappointing tour for him by his standards, as the Seiko man comes up. And he is the leader undeniably now of the Seiko team in this year's race. He gets second, but look at the gap on Botero.
Absolutely remarkable. The Pirate is riding for pride at the moment. You know, there's a lot of things being said in the press about him and Lance Armstrong at the moment. He's trying to prove that he is the best climber in the world. He'll come across the line in third place, and there's a big sprint for fourth.
Well, bringing up the rest of the race here, good ride by Escartine, and there is Christophe Moreau again, Belocchi on the left, all finishing alongside Lance Armstrong, conceding no time. But this rider today, and he has deserved this win, beaten by Eric Decker in Revel in that two-man breakaway, but now it looks as though he's ridden extremely well.
Well, unbelievable for a man to be able to fight on the flat stages and do a breakaway on a mountain stage like that. Paulo Salvadelli, 2.5 minutes behind. Marco Pantani, 2 minutes 46 back.
And so as we look now at the overall situation further down, Olano has never been an entity in the Tour de France this year. Neither has Alex Zula. And the new leader too in the King of the Mountains, well, that's him now. Santiago Botero has got himself on the top of that classification, but Lance Armstrong keeps the yellow jersey ahead of Ulrich, Belocchi and Moreau. No serious changes amongst the leaders because they all finished together. But there is still that controversy raging. Did he or didn't he say things about Lance Armstrong? And now we can go down and speak to Lance Armstrong. He will be with Paul Sherwin, and we can see what Lance Armstrong thinks about Marco Pantani.
Saw a couple of little chats between you and Pantani on the descent. What did he have to say to you?
I read some stuff in the paper this morning, and Marco said it was, I thought, a little wrong. That's why I asked him about it earlier on the stage, and he said, said he doesn't talk to the press in a year, so he doesn't know how I got in there. I believe him, whatever, and I was just kind of joking with him, because when he took off on the Izoard, he was flying, and so I told him, I said, hey, you were flying, and then he said, no, you were flying, and we went back and forth, just joking around. I mean, he's getting better. Tomorrow I think he'll be a factor.
Marco Pantani is now up to 9th overall, but other pre-race favourites like Alex Zula and Abraham Olano are no longer contenders in this year's Tour, and you can say the same for Mark Wouters. Second day in the Alps tomorrow, stage 15 of the Tour de France. The riders going 173 kilometres from Briançon to Courchevel. It'll be another big day. Tremendous number of supporters on the climb, but he's not in this group, I'm afraid, as Ochoa is waiting as long as possible, following the wheel of Jimenez, the Spanish champion there, and Nardello is the rider behind, and Lely. Now the sprint, I think they're getting a bit twitchy here. Ochoa looks as though he's got it under control, but if they can hold it a bit longer, they might have Botero along here as well, but they won't do it. Now there's the finish line.
Well, there's the finish line there inside 200 metres now. Jose Maria Jimenez, the Banesto rider on the front, looks to me, Phil, as if he's in a great day today, but certainly as they get close to the line, the acceleration actually comes from Lely first.
Yeah, Lely goes first, Ochoa takes his wheel, and Ochoa I don't think is going to have the legs to beat Lely today, so it's Lely, Ochoa, Jimenez, Nardello over the top.
But coming up like a bullet up this mountain behind them is the king of the mountains, and that is Santiago Botero. He's 5th place on the road at the moment, and here he is right now. He has an advantage of around about 1 minute on the Armstrong, Ulrich and Virenque group, who are a little further down the slopes, but he certainly has made the unbelievable ascent of this climb, Phil, and I should think very rapidly he will make the junction on the descent.
I think you are absolutely right, Paul. He's coming over the top like a steam locomotive here. One thing's for sure now, he's writing out Richard Virenque as a 6-time winner of the King of the Mountains, at least for this year, because the Kelme boys have been superb in the mountains as a team. They've brought their best men to a tour that certainly suits them. And here he comes over the top in 5th place and around about 48 seconds over the top.
48 seconds, you see him just putting a raincoat on there for the descent, because the chill factor on the descent will take temperatures down to below freezing. But this is the group next on the road there. You can see Hervé has really done an incredible job there. He's pulling the group of Armstrong, Ulrich and Virenque very close to Botero, and certainly I think we'll see the full group come together, Phil, before the climb of Courchevel.
Here comes Richard Virenque now as his teammate moves over, just checking is anybody going to bother. The answer is no, because the King of the Mountains has already gone over the top, and so Richard Virenque gets the 6th place, and Lance Armstrong over the top and can now tick another mountain off in the Tour de France, and he hasn't been challenged yet.
Well, Marco Pantani is in that group as well, so all of the major contenders right there, and not too far behind him, Phil, actually a couple of his teammates.
So we're on our way down the Col de la Madeleine now. It's a long, long descent down to the valleys below, and still it is being led by 4 riders who won't worry Lance Armstrong too much today. And so the riders are now down the Col de Madeleine into the valley of Albertville, and we're about to start the climb up to the finish at Courchevel. Now we rejoin the action at the front here on the climb towards the finish, and gone as Botero from this original breakaway group. Ochoa, who's worked so hard, has fallen off the back. So too has Massimiliano Lely. These 3 riders are now being left, I think, to sort out the finish, Paul.
Well, what a massive attack that was by Botero, the leader of the King of the Mountains competition. He's put Jose Maria Jimenez into difficulty. The Banesto rider is trying to fight back up to the wheel, but you know what? He hasn't surprised Daniele Nardello.
No.
The Italian is right on the wheel of the Colombian there, and I think, in fact, Jimenez is going to recover as well, and we will now have a leading group of 3.
Well, this is Nardello's 4th Tour de France, so he knows what it's all about. His worst ever position is 18th, by the way, back in 1997. Jimenez is trying to get back on terms. Let's have a look at that attack again here. Ochoa had done everything, and he moved out the way, and Botero said, well, this is it. It's my turn now, and he went. And they tried to jump on his back wheel. In fact, Jimenez got on very quickly, got blown off, but he's back on there now. This is Nardello. There's a lot of support for Nardello on the course today. So the first attack has been played, and they've mastered it. Now watch out, watch the Pirate on the left. He's about to go, I think, as he gathers speed on the far side. He's almost riding the track here as he gathers speed up on the banking, and then he starts to accelerate, but he's got some company this time. They're watching him.
That's Kevin Livingston accelerating there. There was a little tentative there coming from Marco Pantani, I think, just to feel the waters there. And Livingston came up alongside to say, well, don't worry, Lance is better than I am, and I'm up alongside you right now. Richard Virenque as well responded to that early attack there by Pantani, and he's up into 3rd place. And Armstrong is not too far behind on the wheel of Tyler Hamilton.
Well, that was a good spot there by Hamilton as he came up behind Pantani. And you see now we've also got the split here as Armstrong is trying to bridge the gap, as going off the back is Tyler now.
Well, Hamilton tried to nail the gap across there for his teammate Armstrong, but Armstrong, the big leader of the Tour de France here, Phil, knows when he has to do the work himself, and he just leapt across the gap. Christophe Moreau, though, also looking pretty good there, responding to the attack and trying to keep himself up in the position of best placed Frenchman. There's Tyler Hamilton there, wearing number 4, his job done for the day, and he now will just have to survive and ride at his own pace up to the summit of Courchevel.
Depends how far they push on here as to, or to whether they slow down a little bit. Armstrong smoothly into that group. He's keeping an eye on Marco. I think of all the riders in the race, you know, Paul, he fears Marco.
He's got a lot of respect for Marco Pantani, and that little discussion they had yesterday on the descent was saying, well, I'm the strongest bike rider here. No, you are. But look at this. Jan Ullrich, number 61, the man who is second overall in the standings, is under pressure.
Well, this was not anticipated at all. Ullrich is in trouble here. If the camera swung up, you would find that he's not on the wheels in front. He is in trouble. And Pantani again. I keep on thinking what he said after his first day in the Pyrenees. I am racing for second place, and I think he is.
He certainly is. He knows what he has to do. You know, he's 10 minutes behind in the overall standings, Phil, but he's only 5 minutes behind Jan Ullrich. When Marco Pantani won the Tour de France in the Alps, he was 9 minutes behind Jan Ullrich, and he will be looking to do something pretty special today. Christophe Moreau, also here, is having trouble.
Well, when he won it that time, it was on Les Deux Alpes, the parallel mountain to Alpe d'Huez, which isn't on the itinerary this year. A few cheers from the riders over that, by the way. Now we're looking here at Balocchi's heading the pace, and also Christophe Moreau, but they're going to have to work out something special. I don't think Escartine can help there. The Pirate has a much nicer rhythm going this time. He looks a lot more serious.
Well, he looks a lot more serious, but Armstrong is in a good tactical situation because he's got a teammate with him, and that's Kevin Livingstone. Look at the style there, just going off 21. That was Escartine. He is in serious problems on this climb. Great maneuver there, riding forward to set the tempo is 1:01. Christophe Moreau, they're already catching the group of 4 who are in between. There is Serrano and Bogard. They're going back to the main group.
They're going back, and quickly now, as the Pirate continues to set the pace here, with Armstrong marking him very, very well indeed. Remember, up the road, we still have the main leaders of the Tour. They are not under pressure as far as we know. Our camera's staying with this intriguing battle here now, because Armstrong is isolated. Livingstone has now gone off as well. That's Richard Virenque trying to get on terms too here. But this is now a battle for the top of Courchevel amongst the head of states of the Tour.
Well, this is the big attack from Marco Pantani, and he's blown away these men. 21 there, in fact, is Escartine. In front of him, 24 was Heras. The slopes of the climb will get steeper as they get closer to the summit, and Marco Pantani looks in very good form, Phil. In the latter part of this Tour de France, he's ridden himself again into condition, and Richard Virenque now is popping off the back of that group. Marco Pantani and Lance Armstrong are going to go head-to-head on the slopes of Courchevel.
Well, this is amazing here. It looks like it's going to be Armstrong and Pantani as Virenque there disappears from the picture. And look at this now. Armstrong is now taking over from Marco Pantani. But the Pirate is able to hook up, I think. And these two, who seem to have formed some sort of, well, I'm not sure it's a distant friendship, as they seem to finish up together every day in the mountains.
Well, it may well be some form of alliance, because Armstrong is going to need some help from Marco Pantani on the slopes of this climb. Pantani is so far behind Armstrong in the overall standings that he's not a major danger, but Armstrong would certainly need somebody to help him do some of the work on the upper slopes of this climb to try and put more time between himself and Jan Ullrich and every other contender in this Tour de France. The Devil's trying to prod Jan Ullrich onto something a little bit stronger if he can, but Ullrich is losing big time once again in the mountains.
Well, the Devil, of course, isn't biased, Paul, but in fact, the Devil is in fact a German.
These are the 3 leaders. They're just ahead of the Armstrong group on the road. This is the flattest part of the course. The attack has now come from Jose Maria Jimenez, and Nardello has gone by him, and they've almost caught out the Colombian.
Oh, that is an incredible attack here. Now, what can Botero do about this? This is just a little bit of a shallowing of the slope before it kicks again. And Botero, who's been left to do all of the work because of his reputation built in this race over the last few days, has been left to fry now, and Jimenez has been caught by Nardello. But the slowing down So there'll be 3 again soon. Or will they? Because like all good climbers, he's gone again. Now this time, can Nardello answer?
Well, he's kicked again. He's a great bike rider. He looks really good on the machine as well. He sits very high, you can see on the handlebars there. That's why he's not such a great time trialist, but he is a very good mountain climber. Looking back there, here is Nardello. This man has courage, Phil. This man is not a great climber. He's a man who rides on his strength.
Dimitrovic back here, the Italian flag waving at Pantani.
That is, in fact, Botero, the leader of the King of the Mountains competition. This bike race is being turned upside down. Lely now, as the road tilts up once more, Phil, is being caught out. He will just have to survive all the way up to the Altiport. On the back wheel of Marco Pantani is Armstrong, followed by Heras, followed by Botero. There are just 2 riders up the road of the Tour de France at the moment in front of this very select group. That is just Jose Maria Jimenez, followed by Daniele Nardello, and then the Pirate and the yellow jersey.
There's plenty of kilometres to go. There's still possibility that these 4 can get across to the leader, but it looks to me as though Jimenez is riding pretty well.
Jimenez is riding very well. He looked very comfortable, but I tell you one thing, Marco Pantani looks pretty comfortable as well. Heras is swinging off the wheel of Marco Pantani. Armstrong takes a look at him, comes alongside, and in fact Armstrong cannot stay on the wheel of the Pirate. It was Heras who let the gap go, and now Marco Pantani has flown.
This time Marco Pantani, is Lance going to try and counter the move, or is he going to let the Kelme boys take it up? Because I'm not sure they can. They're going to have a go, but Pantani, if he's got the legs now, he's free. It's up to him.
Well, he's looking for the win. He said he wanted to attack in the Alps. He was hoping to try and win the stage into Briançon, but he got caught out there by Santiago Botero, who launched a very long attack on the slopes of the Col d'Izoard. Armstrong now is actually a little in difficulty, I would say, Phil. He's forcing the other 2 riders in this group to do the chasing behind Marco Pantani. He's taking up 3rd place there and forcing the Colombian to set the pace.
Well, this is amazing here, because there is Daniele Nardello, and the Pirate is now into 2nd place on today's stage. It is Italy with their #1 climber versus Spain with their #1 climber.
Well, Armstrong, I don't think, would have been blown off the wheel of Pantani if he'd been in 2nd position. The man who actually let the gap go was number 24 there, Roberto Heras, who is in all kinds of difficulty on this slope. Marco Pantani, Phil, look at the pedaling action there. It's very fluid. He's not missing a beat at all. He's eating into the advantage of the man at the front of the bike race, Jose Maria Jimenez, who, with the last time check we had, still had 30 seconds. But the way Pantani is riding, I think he will eat into that with 5Ks to go. Armstrong now accelerates.
Well, this had to come, but look at the 2 boys from Kelme. They've still got something left in those legs as Armstrong takes up the pacemaking, sensing the gap was opening there. He's onto the back wheel of Nardello. But I think you're right, Paul. I think this is the one that's hurting Lance just now.
Pantani looks cool. He's looking over his shoulder. He wants to know what's going on behind him. He will know there's only 1 rider up the road in front of him, and he has now regained, I think, all of the power that he had 12 months ago, which almost took him to a 2nd victory in the Giro d'Italia.
So Marco Pantani heading for the 4 kilometres to go, hunting for this man, Jose Maria Jimenez. He came in with tremendous form to this year's Tour de France. This is his 4th Tour, by the way. His highest finish has been 8th in the race back in 1997.
Well, he's a great bike rider, but he seems to have lost a bit of fluidity there, because Marco Pantani is just 20 seconds behind him. If we pull back, we might see the sign of the Pirate eating into that advantage. And you know, these last kilometres are going to be very long ones, and the last 2 kilometres up here to the finish line here, Phil, I reckon are probably the steepest.
The upper levels now of the town of Courchevel, as we will leave this town very shortly and go out onto the fields above the town and up towards the Altiport. They're going to cheer a Spaniard on as long as they can, but watch out because the Pirate is coming, and here he is. And the irony of the day is that Pantani, 13 seconds behind Santiago Botero overall, is going to go over him in the overall classification now.
Well, there it is. The junction is about to be made. You can see Jimenez now is a broken man. Pantani will blow straight by him unless Jimenez can find something else. But this is a very steep part of the course, and he digs deep.
Look at this crowd now. We're outside the town of Courchevel now as we race up towards the Altiport, and it still will climb right to the line. It's a vicious end. The crowd, though, are delighted they're seeing this man because they love him so much.
Well, Pantani is riding a great race. I don't know how he goes round those corners so fast, Phil. He's going uphill. Please don't forget that at the moment. And he's touching speeds of around about 30 kilometers an hour. Here he is going to come into the tunnel. Once he goes out of that tunnel, he will see the banner, the red kite indicating just 1,000 meters left to go to the finish line. And certainly for Marco, a great victory. He wasn't too happy about his first victory at the Mont Ventoux, even though it was monumental, because there were questions about whether or not Armstrong gave him that victory. But there's no question about this.
No, Armstrong would not have given this victory to him if he could have stayed with him. He's underneath the airport runway now, and he's heading round to the sharp right-hand bend that will ease him up towards the line. The last 600 meters, the Pirate is back in business now, and he's going to have a high place on the GC tonight.
Well, he has proved that he is the king of the Tour de France, Phil, since 1995 at all of the summit finishes. He really has been a real magic man when it comes to flying up hills to the finish of these mountain passes. The great thing about Marco Pantani is his courage. He's dug very deep over the last few days at the Tour de France to find himself once again. And I think the attack of Lance Armstrong on Hautagam made him realize that he can come back as a great climber. And in fact, Armstrong is under the banner now, 1 kilometer to go.
So there's a gap of about 400 meters back to the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. It's academic, of course. Armstrong is in fact increasing his lead over virtually everybody in the Tour de France tonight. He's had a great 2 days in the Alps, but this man now is having the glory today. Marco Pantani is heading up towards the finish now, on top of caution on his own. Look at the face ball.
This is unbelievable for Marco Pantani, Phil. There's only around about 100 meters to go. The cars have been taken off, and Marco Pantani will be alone in the final 50 meters.
Now, will he give us a two-arm salute here? Marco isn't going to bother. He's got the line, a wave to the crowd. 5.5 hours for the winner today. Think of the rest. So, Jose Maria Jimenez suffering now like he's never suffered before, and he's just about going to hang on. This is a really steep final slope here. Up to the second place, up to the line for second place then. Jimenez takes it, and only just in time, because here comes Lance Armstrong. Again, not interested in a place, thinking only of time. Heras gets third, Armstrong fourth. But today, Pantani was first, showing a determination we have rarely seen. This was very special for him. He wins by 41 seconds ahead of Jose Maria Jimenez. Third was Roberto Heras, and then Lance Armstrong came in. Yoshiba Bolocki finished 11th at 2 minutes 26, while Jan Ullrich conceded 3 minutes 21 today, as he crossed the line in 15th place, having been found lacking on the final mountain. A stage win in the Alps to match that in Provence. In all, Marco Pantani has now won 8 mountain stages in the Tour de France. His day, though, almost marred by those who purported to be Tour de France riders. Here's Gary Imlach with more.
Well, actually, Phil, there were quite a few extras trying to get themselves cameo parts in the final kilometre day. The man in the Kelme uniform you saw, he was pretty smartly whipped off the course by the commissaires. But there were 2 rogue riders who did manage to get across the line in the Richard Virenque group. One of them is in the yellow jersey. He raises his arms as he goes over. And a mate of his was a little bit further back in the polka dot jersey. Now, at first, we just thought they were mad spectators who were trying to turn the race into a participation sport. But as it turns out, there are 2 competing explanations. There's a Basque protest going on here at the race today, and they're claiming responsibility. But a couple of minutes ago, we bumped into Eddie Merckx too, who says that there are some renegade filmmakers about who offered him over £200,000 to join them, put on a kit, and ride up the line with them. I have to say, if I was on Call My Bluff, I'd be edging towards the Basque protest explanation, but if it is the filmmakers, we'll keep an eye out and see what's on the shooting schedule over the next few days.
Amazing, but thanks, Gary. Let's have a look then at the overall damage done today. Lance Armstrong has increased his lead to 7 minutes 26 seconds, and Yoshiba Bolocki is only 2 seconds behind the German Jan Ullrich. Heras is up to 5th, and Pantani continues in the ascension. He is now 6th. A great day in the Tour, and race director Jean-Marie Leblanc paid his respects at the memorial today on the Col de Galibier to the man who started it all in 1903, Henri Desgrange. And Henri Desgrange, I wonder if he realises what he did start. I'm sure he does, back in 1903. A week in yellow now for Lance Armstrong, a day off, and now he's back in the saddle again, heading on the road to Morzine. Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the Tour de France. We're now on stage 16, the final day in the Alps. The riders continue from Courchevel, where they spent their second rest day yesterday, coming here to Morzine. And the big climber is back, Marco Pantani. He gave a hint when he narrowly won at Mont Ventoux. He was a clear winner at Courchevel. And history says, you know, he should win here in Morzine, because when we last came in 1997, he put in a fantastic descent of the Col de Jouplan. That's on the itinerary again today, and came into Morzine alone. He went on to finish in a podium position in Paris. But there is a war of words between Lance Armstrong, the convincing leader of this race, and Marco Pantani. Pantani was very unimpressed when Armstrong went away on the Col d'Izoard and then seemed to wait for them all as they went over the top.
Avevo un po' di rabbia dentro perché mi sembrava un'azione un po' esuberante, e anche se il leader bisogna sempre avere rispetto.
In hindsight, after the last few days, in his actions, his words are very disappointing to me, because I thought he had more class than that.
Ieri mi era rimasta un po' sullo stomaco quando stavo tirando, eravamo rimasti lui mi è partito.
I've been disappointed by his attitude and his declarations, let's say.
Overall, Lance Armstrong is now over 7 minutes ahead of Jan Ullrich, who is only in turn 2 seconds ahead of Yoshiba Belocchi. David Miller lies in 67th position. And at the start this morning, a very sad start indeed, as all of the riders and the Tour de France organisation take a minute's silence here in respect of a 12-year-old boy who died on Sunday from his injuries received after he was hit by a publicity car travelling ahead of the Tour de France on Thursday. How very, very sad. So in the end, 137 riders now continuing on the road through the Alps, 196 kilometres. This is the sprinter Albertville. McEwen are getting the better of Eric Zabel, but this rider also deciding, I'm afraid, his tour is over. The abandon of David Plaza.
Well, you know, this is going to be a pretty hard stage with 4 big mountain passes finishing over the Col de Jouplan. But Marco Pantani, Phil, he's decided today he wants to blow this race to pieces as he goes over the first climb of the day, the Col de Cézy, in first place. He's joined on the second climb of the day by Escartine and Hervé, and they're putting a serious amount of pressure on the rest of the race.
Well, this is a long breakaway by Marco Pantani, and quite for what reason other than divilment, which is what Claudio Chiappucci used to do. There's no other reason to have attacked, and he's joined now by Pascal Hervé. It's going to force a reaction sooner or later from the yellow jersey, Lance Armstrong.
Well, there's the hi-hats of Texas there coming out to support Lance Armstrong. But you know, this attack of Marco Pantani today, Phil, has put an awful lot of pressure on the main field, and it has forced the likes of Lance Armstrong to chase for the whole of all of these mountain passes. We're now very close to the summit of the Col de la Colombière, 131 kilometers covered, and still 50 kilometers to go until the final climb of the day of the Jouplan.
Pantani, Escartine at last putting in a big appearance at the front on the mountains in this race for Kelme, who are leading the team race, and behind Pascal Hervé without his captain Richard Virenque yet again. And the crowd is enormous here. This race to the Alps has brought out the people in their tens of thousands, and the Col de la Colombière, you know, is not the hardest climb of the day. That's the last one, the Col de Jouplan.
That is a very difficult climb, but racing as hard as they have done over all of these 3 climbs has made it difficult for everyone in the bike race. The only thing I can think behind the attack of Marco Pantani today, Phil, is because of this little discussion going on between himself and Lance Armstrong. He's gone out there, he doesn't care about Lance Armstrong, he's going to try and blow this race to pieces, and if one of the victims is Lance Armstrong, so well be it.
Well, he's timed at 1 minute and 40 seconds behind these 3 right now. And continually looking around is Pascal Hervé. It's almost as if he expects Richard Virenque to come up and join him.
Well, he's a tough bike rider. He's proving to be almost as strong as Richard Virenque at the moment. He's always been on the attack, and in the mountains we've seen him so many times looking over his shoulder. But they're not really working too hard with Marco Pantani, who's never really managed to have an advantage of more than 1 minute and 40 seconds over the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong, which is now down to a very select group of men.
Heading up towards the top of the Col de la Colombière, and then they are facing 65 kilometers to the finish, but it's not an easy 65. They drop down to the bottom of the valley at Taninges, and then they climb out of it again to Morzine. And over the top, Marco Pantani doing what he does best, goes over the mountain first. It's a third climb of the day rather, that he has topped in first place. We're going back here now to look at the Armstrong group, and they are a little way behind yet because they're not at the top of the climb by any means. Richard Virenque dicing with the new champion of the mountains in this tour, Santiago Botero.
Well, I think it's a little bit of a weak one because, you know, he's trying to get himself minor points here over these mountain passes, and the two Kelme riders who are first and second in the standings are riding all over him. First place over the front here for the man who was the king of the mountains on 5 separate occasions, but in fact that first place is from the group, and there are 3 riders already going over the summit of this mountain pass.
And the Armstrong group has closed in a little bit. They were 111 down, 114. They've come back to just over the minute, so they've had a good steady climb there now. Good fast descent too off the Col de la Colombière, heading down to Châtillon-sur-Cluse. This beautiful area here around Morzine.
Well, Phil, Richard Virenque is trying to get off the front on the descent here of the Col de la Colombière. He's a very good descender. He's left the group of Lance Armstrong behind, and he may well be the sort of rider who can make the junction here on the descent.
Well, he's looking to bridge a 59-second gap here to the men who are setting up the pace at the moment. Pantani's had a great day out, attacked on the Col de Cézanne. Over the top of the Col des Adavis, he was winning there too. And the peloton with Lance Armstrong at that point was 115 down. But look at this now, attack and counter-attack, and it looks like Pantani's teammates are trying to hit him.
Well, this is the Telecom riders on the front. That's Guerini there, and Udo Boltz trying to pull it all back. And I can't really figure out just now, Phil, why they are chasing so hard. They're not too worried about Richard Virenque, who at the moment has been joined by Santiago Botero.
Getting my pinks mixed up there, Paul. But yes, the Telecom boys are outnumbering Lance Armstrong and his team right now, as this group is still concentrating on holding itself together, at least until it gets across the valleys through Taninges and then onto the Col de Jouplan.
Well, this is why they were chasing. Look at this. Christophe Moreau, in fact, has come across the gap on the descent. 4 leaders now at the front of the bike race: Escartine, Pantani, Moreau and Hervé.
Well, we're heading down towards the start of the day's big climb here now as we cross the town of Les Clous. And I must say now, it's the coming together of all of them here.
Well, the whole of this main group is coming back together, and it was really because Christophe Moreau got across the gap there. We had this huge reaction coming from Team Telecom. They're all back together. Lance Armstrong is also comfortably in that group at the moment. And you know, Phil, it's all going to go down to one big showdown on the slopes of the Col de la Jouplan.
Well, there's Pantani swinging off. He's been out front for so long today, and now all of a sudden he sees this rather large group come around him. There's a tap on his butt there by the guy who's alongside him, one of his teammates, just to say keep in, Marco. But now we're going to race out of this town, and this is the Châtillon, and then it's on then to the climb of the Jouplan. Udo Boltz licking his lips, but I wouldn't think in trepidation more than expectation.
Well, they're trying to set it up. These 3 riders have slipped clear on the slopes before we get to the final climb of the day. Kovalev is in there, so is Didier Roos. And on the slopes of the climb, Phil, as soon as we've hit this climb, it is absolutely exploded. There are bike riders all over the place.
Well, they're getting it together, but this, you know, Paul, you've ridden the Jouplan. This is the most deceptive mountain. You don't feel a height like you do in the Grand Alps, but it is such a hard climb.
It is horrendous. It's made more difficult, really, because of the fact that at the bottom there's an incredible gradient. On the front, this is Roberto Heras putting down the hammer. He's alongside Lance Armstrong at the moment. Richard Virenque is there as well. Armstrong looks very concentrated right now. On the back of the group there in the pink is Jan Ullrich. These, Phil, are the heads of state of the world of international cycling, and they're going to fight it out on this very difficult ascent.
And the man no longer here is the man who caused all the problems today since the Col de Cézanne, and that is Marco Pantani. He is in a little bit of trouble, and so too is Jan Ullrich.
Well, Ullrich has cracked again. This climb a little bit too steep for him. He's going to have to try and ride at his own tempo. He started the day a long way behind Lance Armstrong. In fact, he was almost 7 minutes and 26 seconds behind. The Tour de France almost over for the big German who's won this race before, but he must still try and stay in contact, Phil, if he wants to take second place up to Paris. Armstrong looking very good right now. Heras is the man setting the pace, and Richard Virenque just sitting back, waiting for an opportunity to attack. But it's on the early slopes of this climb, Phil, that you can see how narrow the road is, but it is very steep in these corners.
Well, this is really something we never expected to see, but Jan Ullrich, who hasn't prepared for this tour, perhaps as he might have done, is now finding that his body is not lasting the full 3 weeks, and this second leg in the mountains is proving that little bit too hard. Look at the gap now to the yellow jersey.
It is so difficult for Jan Ullrich. He really needs to look at his preparation, Phil, because, you know, you cannot keep consistent form when you come in and out of form the way Jan Ullrich is doing, and you cannot keep consistent form when you put on weight and lose it as rapidly he is doing as well.
Further up the climb now, Roberto Conti, I think it is here. He's still on the attack as he continues. No, it's Guido Trentin just here now.
Well, this looks like one of the riders with him, as well as one of the riders from AG2R, and that may well be Kivilev. A great ride by him to get up here at the moment. These two riders had a slight advantage at the bottom of the climb, but that's about to get reeled in at the moment. You know, Heras has gone, Phil, and Armstrong has not responded just yet.
He's just sitting there, keeping a tempo going, riding shoulder to shoulder with a man who has 5 times won the King of the Mountains this year. He thought it would have been a little bit of a preliminary to have got 6 and equal Lucien Van Impe of Belgium and Federico Bahamontes of Spain. Not been the case, because the Kelme team have had a wonderful tour, and now they're using Roberto Heras. This, surprisingly, is Heras's first Tour de France, but he's had superb results in Spain and in Italy.
Well, 3 times he's finished inside the top 5 at the Tour of Spain. He's a great bike rider. He doesn't look under pressure at all at the moment now as he rides away from Armstrong and Virenque. He started the day, Phil, in 5th place in the overall standings, and a good ride today may well put him very close to a podium position in Paris. Armstrong now content to let Richard Virenque do all of the pacemaking, and the man who he's doing serious damage to, in fact, he was doing serious damage to, because look at this, Jan Ullrich has recovered. He is coming back to the tail of the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. This man today from Germany, Phil, is riding on courage.
What we have seen in this year's Tour de France is all of the big names who normally appear to float around the Tour de France. They have all been put under pressure at some time or other. Ullrich suffered on the road to Hautacam. He's clearly suffering on the Jouplan today, but he has pedalled right back to the side of Armstrong. And it shows you, no matter how great a champion you are, it hurts just as much as if you're not.
Well, that's what it's all about. Bike riding is you have to suffer. You have to learn to suffer. And I have to say, I think today Jan Ullrich has dug very deep into his reserves. Looking now at Trentin, he's gone off the frontier, the Italian rider on the Vinnie Caldarillo team. He wears 189. He is now currently the leader on the road. He's left that man from Kazakhstan behind, Kivilev, and he now looks very comfortable, Phil, but there's a huge battle on the road behind.
And there's a huge crowd on the Jouplan. I don't know if they've all run across from the top of the Col de la Colombière, but that's hardly possible. But the Guido Trentin is trying to do something here, but Roberto Heras is trying to do something even better. Heras is riding superbly now.
He's catching here Didier Roos. Roos took an advantage on the bottom road there to come onto the Col de Jouplan with an advantage of around about 1 minute. He's being left behind now. There are just 2 riders on the road in front of this man, Roberto Heras. One is Andrei Kivilev, and he'll pretty soon be on his tail, and then that will leave just 1 rider in front of him, and that will be Guido Trentin.
So we're seeing here Roberto Heras. He probably sees this as his last chance in his first Tour de France to leave a lasting impression on the race, and he's trying to win this, and he's got to get time on the climb of the Jouplan. This is Kivilev he's bringing back now. He's just picking them off one by one. There were 3 riders clear at the start of the climb. There's only 1 of them left, and he's right in the far side of our camera lens there, and that is Guido Trentin. He's just around the corner, and once Heras gets up to him, he'll be the first rider on the road.
Well, what a great tour this has been for the Kelme team. They've already got 2 stage victories under their belt. Armstrong now is maybe going to try and put an end to that. Ullrich has come forward, and he is accelerating, but the man who blew up the race today, Marco Pantani, is slipping away from the front.
And look at this, it looks as though Lance Armstrong is now in a little bit of trouble here. Look at that face. This is not the face of the man who has ridden the Tour de France so far. At the bottom of the climb, Armstrong, to me, looked as though he was going to eat the field alive. He doesn't look that way anymore.
Well, there was a double take there. You could just see Jan Ullrich looking over. He is probably somewhat surprised at this performance by Lance Armstrong, because earlier down the slopes he was left behind by the flying Texan, and now the tables have turned. Armstrong now is in difficulty, Phil. This is the first time we've seen any chink in his armour since the start of the Tour de France, and we're going to have to see whether or not Jan Ullrich has got any more power in his legs. I think, in fact, Armstrong has absolutely hit the wall.
Well, you know, every top cyclist has a bad day. It's up to the other riders to find out when and hit him when it hurts most. And it looks as though Ullrich is very surprised by the fact he has distanced Armstrong, because Ulrich himself was in trouble at the start of the climb. He appeared to be talking to Virenque then. He was certainly looking at him.
I don't think they can believe what is happening. Everybody thought this man was superhuman. Everybody thought that he was a man who was unbeatable. But right now, Phil, he is proving that he is immortal like any of us. You know, if you have a bad day in the mountains, you can lose many, many minutes. And Armstrong, for the moment, is going to have to relax, have to be calm, and have to try and make sure he doesn't lose too much time. Roberto Heras now has been joined by Richard Virenque, and in fact, the man that they have both left behind is Jan Ullrich.
Well, we never saw the move by Virenque. He just kept the pace going. Ullrich, as far as we know, is still ahead of Lance Armstrong. But now these two are clear here, and they have seen each one of the riders alongside them systematically destroyed. So Virenque and Heras are really as free as birds now. Once over the top of the Joux-Plane, it's a full-on descent right down to the finishing line in Morzine.
Look at this, the time difference between Ullrich and Armstrong, Phil, is almost 1 minute at the moment. Ullrich himself is very close to the two leaders, Virenque and the man from Kelme, Heras. 28 seconds is the difference between them almost at the summit, but Armstrong is losing big time today. He must not panic. He has to remember at the start of the day he was 7.5 minutes clear.
Well, Virenque goes and takes out the points for the King of the Mountains and then immediately asks Heras to come through and work. I don't think he's got much of a hope of that right now. Virenque himself is a very, very good descender. And now look at this, Paul. He's over in third place and he's taking a bike here. He is asking for a bike. Now, is he wanting a new bike? This, in fact, has his race number on, so he must have changed earlier.
Well, there must have been a special plan here for these guys to have a special light bike for the climb here up to the summit of Joux-Plane. There is Lance Armstrong with Conti, with Trentin, with Botero and Christophe Moreau. But this must be, Phil, one of the worst days he's had so far in the Tour de France. Just getting onto the back there as well, the Seiko rider Daniel Atienza.
Well, he's a fair way down, you know. Virenque, Heras, Ullrich went over 28 seconds behind the two leaders, but then stopped. Now look at the clock here, and Armstrong comes over around about 2:10. Yeah, so 2:10, 2:11. Behind 2:13 if they split time them over the top. That is an awful big gap to make up now. For the first time in this year's Tour, at least since Armstrong got the yellow jersey on, he is losing time to his main rival.
His main rival meaning Jan Ullrich. Ullrich now trying to pull himself back up to these two and the possibility of getting himself a stage victory. But you know, Richard Virenque has got the bit between the teeth right now. He's working well with Heras. They now are trying to get the stage victory. For Heras, he's trying to pull himself up high in the overall rankings. A good finish by him today, Phil, could pull him up into third place overall, and that is something that he would certainly be dreaming about after a 5th and 2/3 at the Tour of Spain.
Well, the early descent of the Joux-Plane is a very, very helter-skelter style, switchbacks all the way. After that, it becomes a very fast descent right down into Morzine. Really, you descend till the last 500 metres of the stage today, and then you race into the main street of this beautiful alpine town. I think it's lucky for the race today, Paul, they haven't added in the climb of Avoriaz just outside Morzine.
Well, it's very lucky for Lance Armstrong because this is a bad day for him. If they did climb up to Avoriaz, he would be losing even more time than he is just now. Currently, he's around about 1.5 minutes behind Jan Ullrich and 2.5 minutes behind these two leaders. The leaders are Roberto Heras, number 24 from Kelme, and Richard Virenque from France on the Polti squad. Virenque, though, Phil, you can see urgently coming to the front. He's a great descender, and this man, not one of the best descenders in the world. Even though he is a much heavier man, he doesn't really seem to negotiate the corners or the descents as well as he should.
You can gain or lose so much time going down a steep hill. It takes a very special type of man who has no nerves to go down these mountains. They're not worried about oncoming traffic, at least. The roads are totally closed. Although there was a nasty accident on this mountain a few years back now when a spectator on a bike was riding up and he was hit by a rider at the back coming down, and that rider is no longer with us.
No, in fact, that was a very sad affair. He was in a coma for many, many days, and when he came out of the coma, he ended up being almost a vegetable. And a few years ago, in fact, he committed suicide.
But happier days now in the Tour de France. Well, not for Robert Heras because we've missed it. Our camera was cutting away. We are just on the run into the finish here. That was Heras on the ground at around the 2 kilometre point. Now look at the delay here.
Well, I don't think anybody could have expected that. He came into the corner. That is an unbelievably bad line. Straight into the corner there, straight into the barriers. And he looks as if he's not hurt himself too much, Phil, but you can see the front wheel of that machine is absolutely useless. He has to get a new bike, but this is going to give the chance to Richard Virenque, who is well inside the last kilometre now, fighting up this last incline. He is looking to try and get himself a stage victory here at the Tour de France, and it will be a sweet one for the Frenchman.
Well, it certainly will be. He's been looking for this. He's a popular man amongst the public here in France. He won a Courchevel last time where Pantani won. Pantani won here last time, and now he's done it, and he gets the victory in 5.5 hours and salutes the crowd. So he's won Les Ardennes, Cauterets in the Pyrenees. He's now added Morsy into Courchevel in the Alps. And this man here gaining time today on Lance Armstrong. He too, sadly for Heras, has picked him up.
Well, he's picked up Heras, and this man is flying now. He's pulling himself closer and closer to Armstrong. He will have had good morale at seeing Armstrong suffer. He comes across the line, 24 seconds behind Virenque. Right on his tail is Heras, but the important thing now, Phil, is the time to the Lance Armstrong group. Bellocchi, Hervé and Escartine have passed Armstrong as well.
So Lance has had one of those terrible days you hope never comes, but usually does sooner or later. This is Escartine. He's had a pretty good journey through the Alps, which will now be behind them tomorrow as he sprints away for 4th place. He had a stage win in the race last year. Nothing come his way yet this year. And the sensation from Spain, Bellocchi over the line in 5th place, along with Pascal Hervé, and the clock counts on.
Well, that's the important thing for Armstrong. He mustn't panic. He must try and make sure he limits his losses. He started the day, Phil, with a huge margin. He's here right now. There is Botero with him, Christophe Moreau as well. The man in front is Trentin, the Italian rider on Vinny Calderillo. It's already 1.5 minutes, and he hasn't got to the finishing line just yet.
Well, he's still looking at about a half minute, I think, because it's a fair way into Courchevel here. Armstrong knows that he's going to reduce his overall lead tonight. We don't know yet by about how much, but Botero has hung on to the back of these, and he has had another terrific day of racing for Kelme. He'll keep his lead in that King of the Mountains as well. Trentin has also had an excellent day out. Look at the clock. It's going to hit 2 minutes, I think. As they cross the line, it does. Armstrong will be glad that day is over.
Well, he's going to have to go away from here and try and recuperate, but the day certainly belongs to Richard Virenque. This man has been chasing a stage victory in the Tour de France for an awful long time, and you can see the pleasure in his face as he comes across the line.
So there is the stage result. Virenque ahead of Ulrich, Heras, Escartine, Bellocchi. Armstrong finishing 8th and 2:01 down. That's a big loss for Armstrong. It's about 1.5 minutes plus on Jan Ullrich today. Lance Armstrong really did have a tough time, didn't he? Looking further down here, Christophe Moreau finished 9th in that same group. Marco Pantani in the end losing 13 minutes and 44 seconds, and that was a lot of time for him to lose. He started the attacking too early, it seems. But the man who really had a bad ride today and struggled was Lance Armstrong.
That was, without a doubt, the worst day I've ever had on a bike. We all know what it's, I think most of us know what it's like when you run out of energy and run out of food and you, in English we say you bonk. I had a lot of emotions. I was hungry, I was lightheaded, I was nervous, I was scared. Things were really bad. I could have lost the Tour de France today. I don't know what Pantani is thinking, but he's just a little shit starter, so that didn't surprise me. I mean, that was actually very good for us. All the guys who had ambitions to win the stage, that was a perfect move for us. I mean, let him sit out there, have a couple teams control the race. They never had more than 1.5 minutes, so it was perfect.
Well, a day Lance Armstrong will certainly remember. Let's have a look at the overall situation. There are changes tonight. Lance Armstrong has his lead cut to 5 minutes 37 seconds over Jan Ullrich, and Josipa Bellocchi holds on to 3rd place by just 5 seconds. Christophe Moreau falls to 6th, while Marco Pantani comes in and drops down to 14th overall. David Miller is still holding a good place on his way to Paris. But just take a look at this crash again by Roberto Heras. Inside 2 kilometres to go, overshoots the bend and hits the barriers. He's now in 4th place in the Tour, and I wonder if the 5 seconds he has lost here will cost him a podium place in Paris. On the podium tonight, though, Lance Armstrong. A 7th yellow jersey for him, but what a day of racing it really was. And so the race now ready to say goodbye to France, temporarily of course, and head to Lausanne. Well, Lance Armstrong is certainly still the leader of the Tour de France, but what a shock he got on that last climb in the Alps yesterday when he found his rivals had better legs than he did. I'm sure he will enjoy today's stage better. Hello and welcome now. We're in Switzerland on the shores here of Lac Le Mans in Lausanne. The ride is in fact starting on the other side of this lake at Evian-les-Bains and coming the long way through France and into Switzerland. Well, the Alps are now behind us, but what 3 memorable days they gave us. The highs and the lows of the Tour de France, and there's still 5 more days to go. Just a reminder of the overall situation. Lance Armstrong, after 72 hours in the saddle, has built a 5.5 minute lead over Jan Ullrich. A great battle over 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th places in this race. We're now on the road to Lausanne, 131 kilometres. The Telecom team, Paul, chasing down 3 riders if they can. They're 38 seconds back.
They are. It's Christophe Mangin, Massimiliano Lelli and Marco Velo. Velo going on the attack after Marco Pantani did not start the stage this morning. They were complaining of being hampered by a diarrhea attack over the night.
Well, the mountains are behind him, so he probably gets a fright when he sees a flat road. But now these riders here are onto a finishing circuit, and in the last 500 metres, and Decker has gone away here, and he's gone away in a big effort with Mario Urtz to try and steal the day. He's gambling now because the field are coming back at a tremendous rate.
Well, they're being led out there by Vinokurov on the front there for the man from Zabel. You know, Zabel is right up there in 4th position. They may have left it just a little bit too late, Phil. Zabel is going to try and come out of the main field, but it's going to be Urtz who leads the sprint out into the final straight with Decker right on his wheel.
Well, you know, I think they've upset Eric Zabel again. Here he comes in the green jersey, making a terrific run, but Decker is going to have a desperate run to the line, and Decker has still got some speed in those legs. Urtz is swamped, Decker is not, and that is a triple Decker, Paul, because he gets the victory.
Unbelievable. Great move by him coming into the town with about 2 kilometres to go. He slipped off the front of the pack, and it looked very much as if it was going to be a win for Eric Zabel. Not today.
No, and he's beaten Zabel, and Freddy Rodriguez got 3rd there, and Francois Simon in 4th place. But what a result there. 3 stage wins now for Eric Decker, and this, don't forget, is in his 7th Tour de France. This is how he's done it, with his mouth wide open again. Mario Urtz was almost there for 2nd place, and he got completely swamped on the line and finished only 6th. That's Francois Simon on the left of our picture. But Eric Decker does not believe the way this tour has gone for him. He won at Villeneuve-sur-Lot, he won at Revel, and now he's won in Switzerland on the side of Lac Le Mans. And there is the full result there. Mario Urtz, I say, getting washed away to 6th place. And he won't believe that in the last, the last 10 or 15 metres of the stage. So there'll be no change overall at all, as we're now in Switzerland. Looking further down, Lance Armstrong was 35th. And there is the man on the podium, and well, as you can imagine, it's been a tough day, but it worked out again.
I started the stage to escape with a group, and then see what happened at the finish, but nobody really got away, and Telecom controlled the race the 2nd half. And then we came together at the last climb, and in the descent I attacked with Mario Urtz.
Yeah, and you won again for the 3rd time.
Yeah, 7 years in a row you try, then suddenly 3 times in a row. It's amazing.
Yes, a great finish, but it made no changes to the overall classification, and Lance Armstrong keeps his big lead over Jan Ullrich with only 4 days to go. And so to the race leader, here he is, meeting first of all Hein Verbruggen, the president of the International Cycling Union, and then Juan Antonio Samaranch, the president of the International Olympic Committee. He meets them as leader of the Tour de France for an 8th day. So the Tour de France now will leave Switzerland and head into Germany tomorrow on stage 18, a ride of 246 kilometers, and the weather we expect will still be very hot. And it was here where Eric Decker stood for a 3rd time in this year's Tour de France, and you know there's still time for him to come up for a 4th occasion. Well, yesterday the riders were in Switzerland. Today they are racing a long ride of almost 250 kilometers to here in Freiburg in Germany. At least there's a strong wind blowing and it is behind them. Yesterday in Switzerland, though, it was a beautiful day. The sun shone, it was hot temperatures, the riders enjoyed themselves. We were left with many impressions. Field now making the way away from La Clermont and Lausanne, and we're bound for Germany at 5 minutes to 11, and it is a glorious day now. All the poor weather of the Tour forgotten, and the breakaway has now got 2 survivors, Paul.
Inside 3 kilometers to go. The man on the front is Salvatore Comesso. The man in 2nd position, Alexander Vinokurov from Team Telekom. He may be from Kazakhstan, but the pressure of being on the top German team, Phil, today is on his shoulders. He was a member of a 5-man breakaway group with Jackie Durand, Jens Voigt and Jean-Cyril Robin. At the moment, they are round about a minute behind these 2 leaders.
Well, it often happens at the end of a Tour de France. Vinokurov, 21st this morning, 40 minutes and 10 seconds down, but at one stage they were 27.5 minutes ahead, and they're still holding on to a massive lead of around about 17 or 18 minutes.
Well, if Vinokurov wants to win this one, Phil, he's going to have to launch an attack, because Salvatore Comesso is a very good sprinter. There it is.
There it is, and you're absolutely right, because he's playing to the hands of Salvatore Comesso. Not a big winner is young Comesso. He got his first win in the Tour of the Cape a couple of years ago, but he's been the national champion, and he's also won a stage of the Tour de France here at Albi last year.
Well, nobody was going to catch him out. He knew that attack had to come, and it was the biggest chance for Vinokurov. You know, Vinokurov is not a great sprinter, Phil, but finishing here in Freiburg, it is in Germany, it's on Telekom soil, and they certainly had to have a man in the breakaway to date. I feel a bit sorry, though, for Jens Voigt, the German rider, the only German rider to make that leading group of 5, because currently he's trailing at around about 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's split up at 25 kilometers to go when these 2 got clear. The other 3 are still on their own and well clear of the field, but they're not going to catch these boys up now. A massive crowd here, Paul. One of the biggest we've seen throughout the whole Tour, and this is a popular area of Germany for riding your bike too.
This is going to be a strange sprint here. These 2 guys are almost getting into a track-like position. They're following each other across the road. Comesso currently in 1st position. This is almost like watching the sprint at the Olympic Games. It is so much pressure on the shoulder of these 2 bike riders here. Comesso in 1st position. He's holding 1st position there, keeping close up against the pavement there, Phil, to make sure that if there is going to be another attack, it has to come on the far side.
Well, that's clever riding by Comesso. Just look at the crowd here as we now come towards the finishing line. And you know, they are not interested in gaining time, just winning the stage. It's 50,000 French francs for the stage winner here in the Tour de France. That's 5,000 English pounds, and quite a few more $1,000 too. And Vinokurov, as they come up to the 1 kilometer to go bridge, is not going to come by this man now. There's an attack here. Of course, it had to come from Jackie Durand, but we've gone back down the road by more than a minute.
Well, Jackie Durand is trying to get himself 3rd place on the road. He, in fact, is the man who started this split that's given the advantage to these 2 guys. This is just like watching a track sprint now, Phil, and are they going to stop?
Well, I just hope our motorcycle cameraman can balance the bike as well, because in fact Comesso there almost did a track stand, as he's now waiting and trying to attract Alexander Vinokurov to come and make his move. such an important time for young Alexander. It will be his first stage win in the Tour de France, and he's going to make it count, I think, because he knows really on a straight sprint he doesn't have the legs.
Well, he doesn't have the legs. He may well try and catch out Comesso. Next time Comesso looks forward, just watch out. You can see him starting to wind it up a little bit now.
Yes, indeed, and as he kicks now, this is all or nothing, and Comesso now concentrating on that sprint. This man is a very fast sprinter, but he's good at other things as well on the bike, is Salvatore Comesso. But in the end, he's made it a formality, much to the disgust of Alexander Vinokourov, who felt the pressure of his telecom team there today, because of course they were hoping Eric Zabel would have come in, and Jackie Giron has stayed away. He was the rider who started the attack today after only 4 kilometers, and he was joined by the other 4. And so our great escaper, who was last in the Tour de France last year, but that wasn't last through a lack of aggression, because he is always on the attack on this type of a stage, and he's got clear and he's going to come home in 3rd place. He'll be disappointed with that, because when these escapes he creates do succeed, he likes to win them.
He certainly does. There's going to be big pressure on the sprint though for 4th place, because that's going to go down to Jens Voigt, the only German rider to make this 5-man breakaway, and he's being attacked on the line here by Jean-Cyril Robin of France.
And Voigt on the right, who has been the most aggressive leader on that competition on a number of occasions at this last 3 weeks, especially in the opening week of the Tour. But he indeed now has had to be content there with only 4th place, and that was a good ride. As we look back at the track stand again here, a little bit of a wobbly thrown by Salvatore Comesso as he tries to bring his bike to a standstill, and then he just gets on with the race to the line. But the man we're all disappointed for is Jens Voigt.
Only German rider in the break, though. You must have been thinking for a long, long time, this is my chance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not a lot of chances left to Paris, and I thought this is the day, and today I'm going to make it or break it, and I didn't have the legs, and in the end to really go for the win, but it's still a good performance, I guess.
Thanks.
And so the main field coming in over 15 minutes behind today, and no change of course overall in the general classification, because everybody that mattered was in there. And a better day out too for David Miller, thinking now of the time trial. He won the first time trial of this year's Tour de France, and he might try and do it again tomorrow. Salvatore Comesso getting the stage over Vinokourov, Jackie Giron, Jens Voigt there with the breakaway along with Jean-Cyril Robin today. Then a big gap back to Nikolai Bo-Larsen, bringing home the rest of the race for the memory card team. That's a good result for him today, and he should be pleased with that. This little man, Salvatore Comesso, getting the trophy. Lance Armstrong keeping the regular order in the overall classification. With the time trial now to follow, it might well change. Look at the battle that exists now between Berlocchi, Heras, Veronk and Moreau. In the time trial tomorrow, that could all go upside down. But for the moment at least, Lance Armstrong is still the leader of this Tour, and he would have to be a pretty bad ride if he was going to lose that yellow jersey tomorrow. The crowd is out though, all looking for the big champion Jan Ullrich. He's the world title holder at this particular event. It's time trial day in the Tour de France, and the top 2 riders want to win. On the left, Lance Armstrong is heading for Paris without winning a stage. Realistically, this is his last chance. He's up against the world time trial champion Jan Ullrich, and the German lives virtually on the course and wants to win for his fans. They're here in their thousands to cheer him on, and they expect him to deliver. Lance Armstrong knows the odds are in Ullrich's favour.
I think he's a favorite. I think he's a favorite. I mean, it's his home, and you should see the people out there supporting him. So I think he'll have, obviously, big morale to ride well at home.
Overall, Lance Armstrong leads the Tour de France over Ullrich by 5 minutes, and that in any event is a big buffer. And among the early starters, Dave Miller, who's set the best new times at all distances at the 3 checkpoints, and this is going to be a leaderboard time now as he comes up to the line, so he's still got plenty of strength left in those legs in his first Tour de France. 1:08:57, he's top of the leaderboard, but we're now watching the arrival of Hamilton here. Laurent Jalabert is now number 1, and Hamilton comes in with a great ride, 1:08:02, but he did it for the purpose, to help Armstrong.
Well, that was a pretty good reconnaissance ride. It's a fairly featureless course. Is there much you can tell, Lance?
Well, I think I put in some pretty good split times, so he'll have split times every 3 kilometers off me. So So I think it'll be a good gauge for him.
You're the third fastest in history. What do you think he might be able to do?
I think he's going to have a great ride today. He's really motivated, and he's my favorite for the day.
But this is a favourite for a lot of other people, Phil. This man is the world time trial champion, Jan Ullrich, second overall in the Tour de France, out on course for 58.5 kilometres and racing on home turf.
Absolutely, lives just down the road. He's probably ridden this time trial course a number of times in preparation, and it's not often the home crowd get to see him in action for real as a world champion of the time trial. Ullrich now is on his way, and he's got a few good times to beat now. Armstrong will start knowing the time that Hamilton has done of 1:08:02, and that is a very high speed of 51.592 kilometres an hour. That is the third fastest time ever set in a time trial stage of the Tour de France over this sort of distance.
Well, Jan Ullrich looking smooth and calm at the moment. He is a fantastic bike rider in the individual time trial. And today, Phil, I feel he has got the beating of Lance Armstrong, because he is in good form. Armstrong now in the gate.
So he's off and running, he's out of the start house, he's everything to do. He knows what Tyler Hamilton has done, he knows he can beat Tyler Hamilton, so he can now give it his best shot. And remember, Lance Armstrong here wants to win at least one stage of the Tour de France, and this is probably his final chance. And you know, there's been another American too who won a Tour de France but never won a stage as well.
This is actually the 10th anniversary of the last time it happened, and it was another American rider too, Greg LeMond. 1990 was Le Mans' last Tour win, and for most of the race he was more interested in chipping away at the huge lead Claudio Chiappucci had taken in an early breakaway than actually backing a stage win. In fact, he only took the yellow jersey the day before Paris in the final time trial, where he finished behind Eric Breukink. Like Armstrong, LeMond was the defending champion, and after winning the way he had the year before, he probably felt no pressure ever to win a stage again. 89, of course, being the year he took the most dramatic stage in Tour history, the final time trial into Paris, to beat Laurent Fignon by 8 seconds. The other stageless winners of the Tour were all one-offs. Roger Walkowiak in 1956, Gastone Nencini in 1960, and Lucien Aymar in 66. Now, Aymar won the Tour before he ever won a stage. That didn't come until the following year. But Roger Walkowiak won the race without ever winning a stage in his entire career. Not the greatest claim to Tour fame, but it obviously pales into insignificance next to the achievement of actually winning the overall. And that's the tack that Lance Armstrong has been taking this year. Although in his own mind, of course, he already had a stage win and gave it away. And not just any stage either, but the most celebrated of the entire race, the climb up Mont Ventoux, where he pulled to one side at the finish and let Marco Pantani across first. And the closer he gets to not getting onto a winner's podium, except the ultimate one in Paris on Sunday, the more that seems to be nagging at him.
Yeah, I would be disappointed, especially based on a certain uphill finish a few days ago. Yeah, I would be disappointed. But I still plan on trying to win a stage.
And it's not going to be the bunch sprint on the Champs-Élysées, so today is it for Lance. Otherwise, he's going to bump the membership of the Stageless Winners Society up to 5.
Well, let's hope he breaks his duck, because he certainly is on the course now, and we'll know soon how he compares. Still the best time in the house is Hamilton with that 1:08:02, but now the men who are fighting out this year's Tour de France are all on course, and Armstrong is starting 3 minutes behind the world champion.
Well, that's a big advantage for him, Phil, because he will know exactly what times are being done out on the course by Jan Ullrich. But it's this first time check after 20.5 kilometres which is going to be important, and there it is, 22 minutes and 14 seconds, 5 seconds ahead of Ullrich.
Well, 5 seconds isn't a lot, but it's in the right direction, that's for sure. Ullrich going through in 22:19, Armstrong going through in 22:14. Christophe Moreau has been setting the pace further up the road, and his time has been obliterated. Now we're looking at the arrival of the top white jersey, the best young rider or first rider in the Tour, Mancebo. He has ridden well, 12th place for him, but it doesn't approach the best time of Hamilton.
Well, you know, this man is still setting the race on fire out on the course, Phil. In the next intermediary, time split goes again to Armstrong. We're getting very close there to the time of Ullrich. He's done it again, 48:23. This time 25 seconds faster than the German.
That was the 44-kilometre checkpoint. There's still 14.5 kilometres to race, but it's now 25 seconds up. It looks as though this is revenge for the climb of the Col de Jouplein, and Lance Armstrong is getting back the time he may have lost there.
Well, there's confirmation of that gap, and look at Moreau in third place, 1 minute and 40 seconds behind. This man, though, has done a great ride out on the course. This is Joseba Belocchi. It looked, Phil, as if he was losing his third place overall, but he's recovered over the second half of this time trial course.
He did, because Moreau, and look right behind him, because Ulrich has almost caught him for 3 minutes as they come up to the line. Belocchi may hang on to third, but now look how close has Ulrich got here. This is going to be the second fastest time trial in the history of the Tour, as Ulrich comes in there with that brilliant time of 1:05.26, and that is the new best time.
Well, the only one man who can beat him now is the man who wears number 1, last year's winner, Armstrong, into the final kilometre of this bike race, Phil. The time to beat is 1:05.26, and he is hammering down this course. 1:04.29 is going to be so tight on the line, Phil, but he just might do it.
I think he will, and I think we're going to see one of the fastest times ever ridden in a Tour de France. Over this distance, it will be the fastest ever average speed. As Armstrong comes up to the line now, has he preserved all of that 25 seconds now? Ulrich is watching, but he's really going to have to be content, I think, with second. The clock is working the way of Lance Armstrong. He is going to get his first stage win of this year's Tour de France and confirm himself as the winner in Paris in 2 days' time. A brilliant ride, 1:05.01. Look at the average speed, Paul. 53.986 kilometres an hour.
Almost 54 kilometres an hour. If it wasn't for Greg LeMond's time trial back in 1989, this would be the fastest time trial in history. But LeMond's, Phil, was only over 24 kilometres. This was 58.5.
Absolutely, and with his wife Kristin there, and a little peck on the lips for him. And as he now thinks of the result, Armstrong now 25 seconds to the good in the time trial. Christophe Moreau rode brilliantly to get third. Tyler Hamilton fourth. But the one man there, Joseba Belocchi, has got fifth, and I think saved his third place overall. That is a tremendous result for him. David Miller rode well today, but in the end slipped away into seventh place. There's the race leader, and you can bet your life this was an important stage win for him.
I needed to win a stage, and I felt good today. I mean, I felt good this morning going out riding, just warming up, and so I wanted to do a good one. I thought it was important that, like last year, I thought it was important that the yellow jersey do a good ride, do a respectable ride, and show the, maybe show the race and show the world that he is the strongest man.
But it was a big challenge with Jan Ullrich. Did you get any time checks out on the course?
It was a big challenge. I knew that we were in Jan's backyard, and you could feel that. I mean, it was like every one of his friends and family members and the whole town was out there cheering for him. But I got a lot of time checks all along the way. Johan had, we've been using radios in the time trials now, so I get time checks probably every 5 or 10 kilometers, and then there was the race time check. So I knew where I was, and I felt good. In the end I was dying, but I think we all did.
Paul Sherwin there talking with a contented Lance Armstrong, who now leads Ullrich by 6 minutes and 2 seconds. Belocchi keeps third place, and Christophe Moreau, his teammate, comes up to fourth. Well, it's an awful long way, and indeed, one day before the big finish in Paris, this is the longest stage of the race, Paul, 254 kilometres, Belfort to Troyes. Robin McEwen starting off with good sprinting legs, getting in there ahead of Jackie Durand, but we're at 63 kilometres here, and this is a great shame for Michael Bogart.
Well, this is great sadness for him. Apparently there was a contact with a car that was trying to overtake the main field, but for Michael Bogart, just one day to go in the Tour de France, and he's out. But coming into the town of Troyes, all of the field was together, Phil, and what a remarkable sprint finish it's going to be.
So the Ullrich train, well, it's not Ullrich now because we're on the flats, it's the Zabel train, I suppose, for the rider in the green jersey, about 9 men down at the moment as we come into Troyes here, another famous cycling venue for the Tour de France, and now a flat finish. Can Eric Zabel at last get a stage win? He's got today and tomorrow to do it, and we're inside the last kilometre.
Well, you can see a lot of orange and red jerseys there from Team Pulte. They're looking after Jeroen Blijlevens. Robbie McEwen is right in there as well at the moment, but the control on the front is still Farm Freaks. This is Servais Knaven on the front, keeping the pressure on. Right up there is Richard Vironk as well, trying to help out his own team sprinter.
And the big lead out are coming. Vinokurov is also leading out now. Then he's going to move over and allow Fanini to try and bring Zabel up to the front. This has been a good lead out by Telecom. As Telecom's Vinokurov's tear gets off the wheel now, and Magnus Bagstedt's in the mix today as well. So too on the left there is Robbie McEwen. Now a brilliant lead out by Fanini here. He's still got his charge in his slipstream. Fanini moves over now, and just look at the speed of Zabel as McEwen comes and challenges him. McEwen takes him on. Blijlevens is coming as well, but this is shoulder to shoulder here, and he gets it. That is his first win since 1997 in Pau.
Unbelievable, what a timed sprint, perfectly set up by his teammates there. Fanini, he's a great addition to the Telecom squad. Just look at this, Robbie McEwen coming up the outside. They're all full on here, but today, Phil, nobody was going to take it away from Erik Zabel. He's been chasing this win for an awful long time, and no one can now say that the green jersey doesn't know how to win stages anymore.
Well, he'll be delighted with that one, because at last the green jersey is on course now for a record 5th in a row, and he gets a win, and that's like Lance Armstrong yesterday. He wants to win in a competition as well. Congratulations all round from the team helpers, and Zabel looking quite incredulous here. At last he's got a win ahead of the top boys, and he's been looking better and better and better. And the congratulations too from his top lead-out man there, Fanini. Zabel wins ahead of Robbie McEwen. Jeroen Blijlevens at last, we might say, has got himself out the depth of the pack and looks pretty good up there in 3rd place. The rest of the boys all in the main field, and no change at all overall. But this man here, who is winning the sprint now in the green jersey, he's going to feel very pleased.
For me, personally, a big moment, this stage win. I think it's the sweetest.
I really wanted to win, but just didn't have it.
Last chance saloon tomorrow then.
It's a bit like last year. I was 2nd in Bordeaux and I thought I was going to win there. Bit of the same situation. I'm feeling good. I know I'm going good enough. Just have to be able to pull it off.
In the last years, I have also fun in a race when I was just 2nd, but I'm still in a bunch to fight, and I'm a little bit like an adrenaline junkie, and I go in the sprints and I have fun there, and that's the most important thing for me.
A winner too, Erik Zabel, a lovely man, 15 second places before he finally won a stage again. Paris is now with us, and the Eiffel Tower part of the scenery today. We start at the base of it, and then we race just down the road and back into the streets of the Champs-Élysées. This wonderful city here for only the 2nd time in race history. The race will stay completely in the environs of Paris. We will see all of the famous sights of this city as the riders now assemble, ready for the final stage. 128 survivors of the 180 who signed in Futuroscope. And one rider who has been on the Champs-Élysées on 5 occasions in his 7 starts is Paul Sherwin. He knows how they will feel today.
It's been a very difficult 3 weeks for every bike rider, but it's relief once they get onto the cobblestones of the Champs-Élysées. I know what's going through their minds right now, because I raced the Tour de France on 7 occasions and finished here on 5 of those. It's a special day for everyone in the Tour de France, but if you're wearing one of the leaders' jerseys, it means an awful lot more. It will be a very special day for the former East German Erik Zabel. Born in Berlin 30 years ago and a former student of the East German Institute of Sport, he began his quest 5 years ago to become the most consistent rider at the Tour de France, and will ride onto the Champs-Élysées in green, as he has done every summer since 1996. As he speeds up and down the Champs-Élysées, witnessed by the previous record holder Sean Kelly of Ireland and his own family, he will know that the name Zabel will now be in cycling's history books forever. There will be more emotion for Santiago Botero, who hails from Colombia's most violent city, Medellin. Colombia is a land of climbers, and the King of the Mountains title will make him famous in his home country. He will now join the great climber Lucho Herrera as the only other Colombian to win this prestigious title. His aggressive style and climbing ability also earned him a brilliant solo victory over the Col d'Izoard and Inter Briançon. He will surely be looked at next year for a top 3 finish. The reintroduction of the white jersey for the best young rider revealed the 24-year-old Spaniard Francisco Mancebo to the world. Winning this title does not guarantee stardom, although Greg LeMond did win it and go on to win the Tour de France. Mancebo showed his class in the mountains and will return to the Tour de France next year with bigger ambitions, a bigger contract and more responsibility in the team.
And now these four riders, Apollonio, Voigt, Miller and Agneluto, are going to be caught by the field, and they're almost in sight of home.
Well, it was a good move, Phil. It looked as if they were going to pull it off, but you know, the sprinters have got themselves organised for this last sprint on the Champs-Élysées, and it could well make it 2 in a row for Erik Zabel, because his sprinting form, I think, Phil, is back.
What a way to go out of the Tour with a record 5th green jersey, with a weekend of wins when he's tried for so long to get them. Well, this is the breakaway. Voigt riding on this last day as aggressively as he has done ever since the race started. But now it looks as though this attack is not going to work. Good show by David Miller too. Shows to us all that this man does have a great future as a Tour rider.
Well, he started off with the yellow jersey, wore it for 3 days, and I have to admit, Phil, I did think he was going to walk away from the Tour after a very dramatic crash on the stage of the Mont Ventoux, but now he's back in the pack and he is going to race on the Champs-Élysées, and that is after 3 weeks of bike racing. The Bonjour team trying to move forward now to organise the sprint there. That's Francois Simon very close to the front, but watch out for the green jersey. There he is, Erik Zabel in around about 7th position.
Down past the Rue de Tuileries, heading now towards the Place de la Concorde. A massive crowd here, been well entertained by the riders in the streets of Paris now for 3 hours or so. The Bonjour team has tried and tried and tried to get a stage win. So far, none. Perhaps it'll all change right now. But watch out for the Farmfleets team. They're trying to get Robbie McEwen up here.
Well, Robbie McEwen's the man who got the stage victory last year here on the Champs-Élysées. He was second yesterday, and morale must certainly be very high. The Banesto riders are moving up on the left-hand side there, and everybody now wants a last crack at the sprint here in the Champs-Élysées. This is a great place to win a bike race, Phil. It has to be the most beautiful finish in the world. There's a few arms and legs coming off the bike there. That was Magnus Baxter. It looks to me as if he was getting a sling off Jens Voigt. The green jersey of Zabel still in the front.
So this is the turn right now. It's a long way up to the line. In fact, you can't afford to go too quickly. Max van Heeswijk, the Mapei boy, bringing through Fred Rodriguez. Rodriguez in front of Stefano Zanini. They are the 3 men, and then they've got the green jersey who's gritting his teeth there to Zabel. And now Zanini comes over to the right here. Max slows it down, and Zanini is coming up to the line, and it looks as though Zabel is too late on the line. Stefano Zanini ahead of Erik Zabel and Roman Weinsteins. The Tour is over, and the winner is Lance Armstrong.
What a great ride by Armstrong. He didn't have to worry too much about the sprint on the final day, but Phil, that was a very good manoeuvre by the Mapei squad. They had it all sorted out. There's Freddie Rodriguez, Max van Heeswijk. The 3 of them were 1st, 4th and 5th. But this man has dreamed about winning on the Champs-Élysées for a couple of years now. He finished 2nd behind his own teammates Tom Steels when Steels took out the final stage victory here, and this is what he wanted. He's got to say thanks to the team.
Man, look at the faces on the sprinters here. Weinstein's close, but never quite close enough throughout this Tour on the flat stages. I've lost count of his 3rds, 4ths and 5ths. This man, though, has got a win now, winning ahead of Erik Zabel, Roman Weinsteins. Freddie Rodriguez also had a marvellous Tour de France. Max van Heeswijk in his first Tour too, up there in 5th today. They'll all be pretty happy with the result. Now they can all go out and have a good night out on the Champs-Élysées for the first time in more than 3 weeks of racing. But there's only one champion. His name is Lance Armstrong. He wears the yellow jersey at the end of his 2nd successive Tour de France, and here he is now with Paul Sherwin.
What's the difference between this year and last year on the Champs-Élysées?
Last year I didn't know what it meant to win the Tour de France. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it would do to me as an athlete, what it would do to me as a person. I was confused. I was surprised, and it took me about a year to figure it out. And now I figured it out, and so I knew what it was that I was riding in here with on my back. I mean, I knew what the significance of the jersey. So fantastic.
Is it good enough to want to come back?
I will definitely come back. I will definitely be back next year. I don't know how many more years, but definitely be back next year.
Well, that's good news for us, but I'm not sure about the rest of the riders in the Tour. The big difference this year, it's a family affair for the Armstrongs now. Kristin there, his wife, and new baby Luke already a winner on the podium in the Tour de France. Of the other competitions, the green jersey won for a 5th time in a row. That's a record by Eric Zabel. The best young rider, Francisco Mancebo, and the king of the mountains, a Colombian this year, Santiago Botero. This has been a very memorable Tour de France. I hope you've enjoyed it. For Gary Imlach and Paul Sherwin, I'm Phil Liggett saying so long for now.